Hello, I'm Bret and you're watching The Defining Moment for Creating the Culture of Conscience. Our guest today is John Ishvaradas Abdallah. John Ishvaradas is a Sufi Muslim. He is the author of A Sufi's Ruminations on One World Under God. John holds a Master's of Science degree from the University of Wisconsin. He was born in Hyderabad, India, and has lived in the United States for the last 43 years. John and his wife Yuriko have 2 grown children. Sufi John Ishvaradas, welcome to The Defining Moment. It's really a pleasure for me to welcome you to our studio today.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Thanks for coming. Our topic today is One World Under God. And I'd like to begin by giving you a chance to share a defining moment from your own life.
Well, I think that one of the defining moments, there are several defining moments, but one of the defining moments in my life which triggered writing this book was an incident when I was working as a director of research and quality assurance in the food industry. And when I discovered that the employer that I had was not really doing things that were ethical and legal. So I met with him and I confronted him with this discovery, and it turned out that I was not going to get anything different from what they were doing. They were not going to change their ways. In fact, I was offered several things for keeping quiet and continue to work over there, but I refused to do it, and I quit the job, and I told him that I was going to report it to the government. And I did report it to the FDA and the USDA, but although USDA was already on the premises of this food processing plant. So that was really, it took some guts on my part, I should say. And the reason is we were expecting my first child within a few months. And I was concerned about what was going to happen and all those things, but I said, I cannot let anything stop me or prevent me from doing what I need to do, because that's the right thing to do. And so when I reported it, nothing happened, of course, but for some reason, FBI came and interviewed me several times, 2-3 times, over a period of 3 months. But then nothing happened. So at that time, I was going to, we're going to take my son, who was newly born, to Japan, because my wife is from Japan, and we wanted to take him to Japan. And so all 3 of us went to Japan, and I came back in about a month and a half. I signed up with some employment agencies and to find a new job, and they told me that every new employer, a prospective employer, is going to ask you, why did you quit your last job? And what are you going to say? So I said, well, I will have to tell them the truth, that this is the reason why I quit. Because number one, I don't want to get into a similar situation with another company with not doing something right. And second, I want them to know what my ethical values are. So they said, okay. They tried to set up interviews for me, and they said, sorry, we are not getting any good response because I think you might have to change your reason for quitting or something like that. I said, well, I would rather change my career than tell them something that is not true. So it was during that period of time that I started questioning a lot of things. Incidentally, I should mention that at this point in my life, I was an agnostic. I did not even consider myself a theist, a 100% theist. I was an agnostic, doubting the existence of God. It was during that period that I felt that I had a spiritual experience. It's very difficult to define spiritual experiences. And it almost drove me crazy, and I thought this whole world is on the wrong path, and I'm the only one who is on the right path. And so I started writing something, and when I wrote, this is not the same book, incidentally, that was something different. And then I sent a copy to a few people among my relatives, and one of them was a professor in my relations, a professor of philosophy back home. He was very excited after reading some portion of the book, and he said, I am coming to visit with you. So he came and spent about maybe 20 days with me. And he said I needed to ground myself, because this is, he said, typical of spiritual experiences. People sometimes have gone crazy after such experiences. So you need to ground yourself and read something and see where do you find yourself among all the things that you read. So that time I started reading literature and sacred texts of all the different religions, and finally settled down upon the Sufi model, because Sufi I found to be, or Islam also, I found to be the most accepting of other religions, which in my opinion now has become a very narrow focused religion, although that's not the way it was supposed to be. So I would say that was a defining moment.
Okay, very clear. Thank you very much for sharing that. I appreciate that. Why has it been so difficult throughout history for the human race to embrace the idea of one world under God?
What a question. That's a very beautiful question, but not so easy to answer in a few minutes. That is one of the reasons why I have written the book. But of course, the book itself cannot be answer all the questions that come up. Well, one of the reasons is there is a concept in like Sufism, or in Sufi thought, the idea of reality versus illusion. So, for example, you might consider yourself white, and I might consider myself Asian. And is that a reality or is that an illusion? Well, it is both. Because reality is that, yes, looking wise, we look different. But in the ultimate reality is we are all human beings. That's why all the scriptures, Bible, the Quran, and all these scriptures will say we are all children of Adam and Eve. So giving us the one ancestor for all human beings. But why is it that we have not accepted that? Obviously, we haven't accepted that. Otherwise, we wouldn't be. We would be always referring to each other as "Hey, brother" or "Hey, sister," because we are all the children of Adam and Eve. So I think one of the reasons is the other concept I can bring again, a Sufi concept, which is the ego. And talking about ego, I want to go back to the first commandment of the biblical first commandment, "Thou shalt have no other God before me," which is translated into another language or another time. Prophet Muhammad in the Quran says, "La ilaha illallah," which means there is no God but God, which is, I believe, is a variation of the same theme, which is there is no other God. Thou shalt have no other God before me. Now, the biggest other God that we can think about is my ego. I mean, there may be some other gods that the biblical and the Quranic versions talk about, which are physical statuettes or idols that are considered normally what the other gods are all about. But another point is that the biggest small god or the false god is my ego, is the I in myself. So if we can overcome that I, that is when you will begin to experience or realize the enormity or the greatness of God. So I think that's how that's the reason why we haven't been able to realize that, because we have to. It's not so easy to overcome the I in me, because all I want is I am the center of the universe. That's what everybody wants to get. Everybody wants to acquire things. So everything comes through that I, and that is the biggest hurdle between you and God and between you and me. So I think that's what it is.
Okay, very clear. Thank you so much. Why is it in everyone's best interest to see ourselves as members of one global family under God?
You have very good questions, and I wish I had those questions in my book also. But I think it's quite obvious. One of the themes that I use is when you believe in one God, the oneness of God, also translates into oneness of human beings, oneness of mankind or humankind. And I consider God, in my book, I don't want to talk about my book all the time, but what I define God as a trinity of love, peace, and freedom. God is known by attributes. Quran says God is known by 99 names, but 99 names, each name has several other meanings. So it could be a multiplicity of names or attributes of God. But I thought the most essential attributes of God are love, peace, and freedom. But love, peace, and freedom is like an indivisible trinity. You cannot have love without peace and freedom, or you cannot have freedom without love and peace. And the same applies to peace. You cannot have peace without love and freedom. Now, how does that happen? Well, if I love you, I want to give you complete freedom, because only because I love you, that's why I want you to have freedom. And I want the freedom for myself, and I want the love for myself, and that's what will make, if all of us have freedom, then this will be more peaceful. So, but how can a person be free when that person wants to subjugate another person, or does not want to give total freedom to another person? So when you deny freedom to another person, then you lose the freedom yourself. And that's why it is important that we honor the freedom of other people and the peace, and love will come through that one. Everybody loved each other, everybody will want the same thing for everybody else. And the neighbor, maybe at that time was even Jesus and Prophet Muhammad were probably thinking about the same thing as I'm thinking, or we are thinking at this time, that the neighbor is not just the physically closest person living next door to you, but also anybody living on this planet is a neighbor. So we extend the same concept to everybody else, so that everybody, and that comes the idea of equality. Equality before God means we have to implement thy will be done, is the concept of equality before God, that we need to treat each other equally and lovingly and compassionately, like the Buddha said, compassion.
Okay, thank you so much. What principle of life have you discovered that allows us all to overcome the artificial barriers of race, language, nationality, and class?
It's a good question, very good question. And I think the single most principle, the one principle, is the principle of love. And that comes from love of God. And the love of God, there is a litmus test to it. If you say, yeah, I love God, say, well, if you love God, then you necessarily have to love your fellow human being. I mean, that is automatic. And if you're not feeling the love for the neighbor, then that means you haven't reached the stage of loving God. So, I mean, that is the principle. The principle of love is the one that that's the only one that will help us overcome all these other barriers. And any barrier between us human beings is a barrier between myself and God, between you and God. When you experience the love of God, you have to automatically share it with everybody else in the planet. And you have heard the name of Rumi, the poet Rumi,
yes.
Who incidentally, I understand, is one of the most famous poets in America, or the best-selling poets in America. His order, the Sufi order, is called the whirling dervishes. And the dervish means mendicants or wanderers. But they come here every once in a while, and in the last year they have come quite a few times. And in their performances, you will notice that the dervishes, when they do the whirling dervishes, the dance or the sema, they will hold one hand facing up towards the sky and the other one down toward the earth. So what that signifies is that they are receiving the mercy of God from this hand that is facing the heavens, and then distributing it equally with fellow human beings on the planet. and that's what it signifies. So when you do that, and that is also like a proof that you have had a genuine spiritual experience. People say, how do you know your experience is genuine or not genuine? So I would say that the experience is genuine when you have received the mercy of God, the love of God, and now you want to share it with your fellow human beings. So if you're not sharing it with your fellow human beings, I think it is probably not a true spiritual experience.
Okay, thank you so much. In what way is materialism an obstacle to the awakening of the human spirit?
What a beautiful question. I mean, it's a very important question, not only in Islam, but also in Christianity, Buddhism, and I would say almost all spiritual traditions. You know, it has been only, I think, maybe since the Industrial Revolution, maybe, that materialism has taken on such a big power because of the production of material goods has become so easy, and we have become very much used to or want to have more and more accumulation and more material comforts. But comfort was never the goal of any of the messengers of God or the prophets. If you read the Bible, in fact, if you go back to the Jesus in one of the verses, and I'm not repeating verbatim, but I'm paraphrasing, that it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than for a rich man to go to heaven, to be admitted to heaven. And Jesus lived a life of almost a homeless man, wanderer, which is like the meaning of dervish. Dervish means a wanderer, or a person who goes from door to door. And Prophet Muhammad, for example, when even though he was one of the most successful prophets in the sense that he, and this is Karen Armstrong says, he was one of the very few, or probably the only prophet or the messenger of God who had a success during his lifetime. He was able to establish a mini state in his own time, because all the Arabia came under his rule. But you know, he never lived like a king. He still slept on the same floor where he used to sleep, on a bed that was made of palm leaves. So when he used to get up from there, he used to have an impression of the palm leaves on his body and on his cheeks. And people tried to bring a lot of luxurious items for him, because he was like the king over there. And he said, I'm not the king. There's only one king. The king is God. And I am just like you. And if people brought things for him, he will distribute it to other people. And so the concept of poverty, it used to be a highly coveted concept. People said, in order for you to have a spiritual experience, you need to live in poverty. But poverty also has changed in the meaning. What was meant before by poverty was simplicity, or minimum needs, to meet minimum needs and minimum comforts, not luxury. And so I think in that sense, it is important that we go back to those roots, because that's the only time when you'll be able to establish a relationship between you and fellow human beings and God, because the luxury creates differences among human beings. So when we all go back to our basic necessities and what is needed, I think that will be, I think that is one of the biggest challenges, because people are not going to give up, and it was not easy at any time for people to give up luxuries, people who are used to luxury. In a way, all these material or desires for all these materials is, in a sense, these are all the false gods, the small gods. In the first commandment, they say, thou shalt have no other God before me. So the love of God, and even in the Bible says, I am a very jealous God. You know, some places I'm not quoting maybe verbatim, but God says, I'm a very jealous God. I want you to love me exclusively. I don't want you to love anything else. So anything else that we have a desire for becomes a small God. or at least has the potential of becoming a small god or the false god. And those are all idols. Now, idols don't have to be physical. They could be mental images or without any image, just like we have God without an image, at least in Islamic idea or in Buddhism. The same way, the idols can also be formless. They could be in your heart, something that you desire most that could become an idol, and that usually is an idol. So, but the biggest idol, like I have said before, is the I, the ego. I am the biggest obstacle between me and you, and between me and God, and that's one of the biggest idols.
Okay, very clear. Thank you so much. What actions can ordinary human beings take to make the greatest difference in creating the conditions which would allow for the establishment of a just and peaceful world under God?
I think the actions we can take is to talk to our neighbors and to get involved in the political process, because we have to change the system that we have. And there's a lot of changes to be made in the system, the economic system, the political system. And I think the changes, first of all, we have to think about them ourselves and just bring it out to the table for discussion. Because right now there is no discussion going on any place about, everybody has accepted that this is the way life is going to be, and we are going to live under this capitalistic system. And I think the capitalist system was totally different when it started. Now it is corporate capitalism, which is another monster which we have created, and it's going out of control because the wars are also the result of this corporate involvement. So we cannot have peace with all these things going on, because it is in the best interests of the corporations to have wars, because that's when they can make more money by selling arms, as well as all the subsidiary industries that support the war. So I think there is a lot of work to be done, but I think the beginning is for people to start discussing these issues and talk about it openly. You know, Lao Tzu says, you know, the straight path is very easy, but people like to have complicated paths. And that's what we have done. I think the life would have been very simple if everybody agreed that everybody is equal. And, you know, we have a slogan of equal opportunity, but I think the equal opportunity is a farce, because how can a person who is living in the slum today and another person who is born in the riches could have equal opportunities? They couldn't have equal opportunities. We may think, or we may want to make ourselves believe that there are equal opportunities, but there are no equal opportunities. So my suggestion, or not my suggestion, but I'm suggesting that the only way we can create a peaceful and just world is to establish economic equality. Economic equality is more important, and it is very important. In fact, it is necessary for us to experience the equality, because through economic equality only can we experience the equality in any other sphere of life. So without that, you cannot achieve that. And in order for us to do that, the change will have to become through political means. And that's why Gandhi said that people who think religion has nothing to do with politics don't know what religion is or what politics is, because they cannot be separated, in the sense that you need to bring the ethical values of the religion into the politics of the day, politics of all times, actually, not just for the day. So I think we have a big hurdle, because right now the world is going around. Capitalism is like a religion. I mean, if you say something against capitalism, is almost committing blasphemy. You know, you say, my God, this guy must be a commie or something. But communism itself may not have to be the solution. But because communism doesn't have the concept of sharing the mercy of God with everybody else, because communism does not believe in God. But if we can achieve the same goal, that is much better than what we have today, which is creating more disparity of wealth, not only in America, but in India especially, and in all the other countries that are following the same model. The disparity is increasing. There have been several programs, I'm sure, or not only talks as well as books on the subject that the disparity of wealth is increasing, and that is creating a problem for the future.
Okay, very clear. Thank you so much. What do you see as the key to advancing interreligious understanding and interfaith cooperation?
I am involved in the interfaith movement for a long time, and well, I should say not for a long time, but 9/11 was another defining moment, so to speak, for a lot of interfaith dialogue and interfaith activities. And I have been a member of the Parliament of the World's Religions, and that is doing a very good job. It will be holding the Parliament again, I think 2009 in Australia somewhere, Melbourne. I think the most important thing we can do is just talk about different faiths, because there is a lot of commonalities among the faiths. And the differences are there. I mean, I'm not saying that there are no differences. There are definitely a lot of differences. And there was a very good title of a book that I saw recently about Islam and Christianity, and the title was Oil and Water. But the author used that analogy to say that, yes, oil and water don't mix, but some of the best foods that are prepared are with oil and water. So, I mean, that analogy can be used.
So respect the differences and emphasize the common ground.
Emphasize the common ground. And that's what my proposal is all the time, that there is a spiritual unity of all religions. And so that's how we can, have a God, one world under God of all religions. Because sometimes I have taken the position, even though it is not very acceptable among the interfaith dialogue, but interfaith dialogue also has to understand that this is also another position that they have to consider, which is that God has been arrested or imprisoned in all these religions, and we need to liberate God from the bondage of religion before we can liberate ourselves and be friends among ourselves.
Okay, beautifully said.
Yeah.
Your book is A Sufi's Ruminations on One World Under God. How can people get a hold of your book?
I think the easiest way to do it is to go to Amazon.com. And it's available on Amazon.com. I can give you some other things, but I think that will be the easiest.
Okay, Sufi John Ishvaradas, I want to thank you so much for having been our guest today on The Defining Moment. It's really been a pleasure for me to listen to and learn from everything you've said. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. I have also learned quite a bit from just the questions. Thank you.
You've been watching The Defining Moment for Creating the Culture of Conscience. You can find us on the internet at www.definingmoment.tv. Thanks for watching and have a great day.